Hello, my lovely little gemstones, it's Saphira, and today I'm going to be reading the rest of Chapter 3 of I Am Creativity, written by me. As Thomas grew up, he started calling on his creativity more. Roman accepted the task of helping their host, offering his input on school projects and personal ideas. Remus said he didn't mind. While his brother took the reins and worked hard to brainstorm, Remus could wander the mindscape, offering up ideas as they came to him without any restrictions. "Remus, please stop pacing. I can't think," Roman groaned, heel of his hand pressed against his cheek as he stared at his notebook, the page covered in disjointed notes and ideas. Remus stopped moving, pouting. "I'm trying to help. I can't think if I don't move around," he shot back, to which Roman sighed. The white-clad side of creativity turned in his chair and gave his darker-clothed brother a tired smile. "I know you are," he said softly, "but it's making it hard for me to think. Why don't you go take a walk and see if anything comes to you? Here." Roman offered a small notepad and pencil to Remus, which he took quickly. Roman smiled, making sure Remus knew he wasn't mad. "Once you come back, we can compare notes and help Thomas together, okay?" Remus deflated a little, feeling as if he was being sent away like a child. Regardless, he wasn't getting anywhere by pacing here anyways. He stuck the notepad and pencil in his pocket, shrugging nonchalantly and flashing Roman a bright smile. "I'll be back. Don't finish the project before I get back." Roman chuckled and waved at him as he left the room, turning back to the desk and stretching before going back to his notebook. Remus let the door close behind him, leaning against it for a moment. He didn't really want to take a walk down to the common room where Morality was likely to be. Ever since that night where they'd chosen names for themselves, Patton, had started to treat him different. It was like he had forgotten that he was Thomas's creativity too. He turned his head the other way, towards the darkened hallway where they were forbidden to go. There was cold oozing from the shadows, and it sent a chill down Remus's spine. Patton would be furious if he went down there. Remus grinned wickedly. Good. With head high and shoulders back, the darker creativity started down the hallway, feeling the shadows curl around him and swallow the light behind him until he was surrounded by cold, pure blackness. Remus blinked, trying to let his eyes adjust to the shift to complete darkness. He looked over his shoulder to try and catch the light from where he'd entered, but there was nothing but a faint pinprick of light in the distance. For a moment, he pondered whether he should go back. Already he could feel the warmth being leached from his body. Then he shook his head, turning forward and marching on. He kept one hand on the wall, figuring that if he didn't find anything, he could just turn around and follow it back out. His footsteps were muffled, as if the darkness itself was swallowing the noise. It unsettled him, so used to the imagination where everything was always so bright and stimulating. Strangely enough, though, there was something comforting about the darkness. It was cold, but welcoming. As he kept walking, Remus started to believe Patton was right about this place. There was nothing here, at least nothing that was interesting. The only thing that kept him going was the two shadowy sides he'd caught glimpses of over the years. He'd only ever caught one good look at them. One night, after everyone else had gone to sleep and Remus was drifting off, he'd heard footsteps and soft whispers passing by their door. Curiosity had driven his exhaustion away in an instant, and he quietly climbed down the bunk bed ladder and snuck out of the room without waking Roman. Quiet voices and the sound of shuffling feet came from the kitchen. Remus had snuck closer and crouched low on the stairs, looking through the banister at the intruders. One wore a thick hoodie, zipped tightly up to his throat and hood thrown over his head. He was tall, at least as tall as Morality or Logic was. It wasn't easy to recognize that, though, as he kept his shoulders hunched, like he wanted to be smaller. He was grabbing things from the cupboard and shoving them into his pockets, as well as handing them to his partner. The other was shorter and looked slightly younger, probably close to him and his brother, or Passion. He wore a long cape that fell at his wrists, made of some thick fabric. At the time, Remus had wondered how they weren't melting, considering how warm it was in the mindscape. Now he was starting to understand. He rubbed at his bare arms, goosebumps crawling on his skin. Then something shifted, and he jolted back to the present. Remus blinked, looking ahead where the faintest glow of light was emanating from the wall. Keeping his hand on the wall, Remus sped up to investigate. So there was something here after all! As he approached, he realized the light wasn't coming from the wall, but rather seeping under the crack of a door. Remus tried to read the sign hanging on the door, but the light wasn't bright enough. After a moment of hesitation, Remus knocked. Then he knocked again. "Hello? Anyone there?" There was no answer. Not even his own voice echoed back to him. Remus groped blindly for the doorknob, turning it and opening the door. He gasped at the sight he was met with, squinting at the light that poured out. It looked like a normal bedroom on the floor, but instead of a ceiling there were glowing balls of light floating lazily above him, casting golden light down onto the floor. They didn't seem to emanate heat, though, as the room was even colder than the hallway. Despite that, Remus felt drawn in, and he started to take a step forward into the room. He needed to see one of the spheres. Just one. That would be enough. "Stop!" The voice startled Remus, and he jumped back, away from the doorway as he glanced around frantically trying to find the source of the voice. From the darkness down the hallway beyond the door, two glowing purple eyes shone brilliantly. Remus let out a breath. There were people here after all. Hi, I'm Remus. I'm half of Thomas's creativity. You don't belong here. Remus paused, blinking. Huh? You need to leave. Now. The creative side took a step back. What just happened? Suddenly his heart was racing and he felt an overwhelming urge to run away, back to the light and warmth of his room. Yet he was frozen, feet planted firmly as he shook. Whether it was from the cold or fright, he couldn't tell. What are you doing? Leave. You don't belong here. You need to go. Fear, what are you yelling about? A new voice came from the darkness. The purple eyes turned away from him and it broke the spell holding Remus in place. He stumbled, taking a step back as a single golden eye appeared. The person it belonged to walked forward, and Remus realized with a start that he had snake scales crawling up from his collar, stopping right below the curve of his cheekbone. I'm sorry about that. Fear just wanted to make sure you didn't step into my room. It's not good for people who aren't used to it, the side explained, reaching forward and pulling the door closed. The hallway was plunged into darkness, and the creative side blinked, reaching for the wall again. Instead, he felt a gloved hand grab his and start pulling him past the door, back the way he came. He is right, though. You shouldn't be here. It's not good for one of you to be on our side of the mind. I'll lead you back. Wait, I'm not going back yet. I just got here, and I have so many questions for you two. Well, we don't want to answer them, the purple-eyed one snapped, but the one who held Remus's hand paused. What kind of questions? Well, like who you are. Why do you stay here when it's dark and cold when you could come out and stay with us? Why do you sneak into the kitchen and steal food at night? Why do your eyes glow? Why? Enough! The glowing purple disappeared as the side squeezed his eyes shut, hands clamped tightly over his ears. Go away, now! No! Go home! Again, that gut-wrenching fear shot through his bones and made Remus want to bolt, but the gloved hand held onto him and kept him grounded. Fear, please, it's all right. He's not here to hurt us. You're wrong. I know Morality sent him here to spy on us. I told you he knew we took food. Remus's eyes widened and he stomped his foot. I'm not here for Patton. I would never do a favor for him. He's a jerk. The golden eye turned to him, staring into his soul. You don't like him? But he's the leader of Thomas's sides. We have to respect him. Remus laughed. Leader? He's useless without Logan helping him out. And all he ever does is nag. I can never do anything right, according to him. He would never let me come here. But he is not the boss of me. I see. Why don't you follow me, then? I think we have a lot to talk about. Remus was pulled down the hall, away from the door with the starry sky and further into the darkness. His heart was racing, but this time it was from excitement rather than fear. What do you think you're doing? The purple-eyed one. Fear, Remus recalled, hissed through his teeth as they passed him, and his guide's glowing eye tilted up to look at him. Go to your room, Fear. I'll make sure he doesn't do anything. Despite being shorter and seemingly younger than Fear, Deceit had a confidence to his voice that reminded Remus of Morality. No way am I leaving you alone with one of them. I'm coming with. Suit yourself, he chirped, pulling Remus forward. I'm Deceit. The scaredy cat following us is Fear. Shut your little mouth, came the snarky reply. Deceit snickered. I'm Creativity, but you can call me Remus, too, he told them, trusting that Deceit wouldn't lead him straight into a wall. How can you see? It's pitch black. We've lived here a long time, Deceit answered, turning a corner and pulling Remus along. But why? There's plenty of room with us. We could make rooms for you two, no problem, Remus boasted, puffing his chest out a bit. We like it here. Watch your head. The warning came just a moment too late as they walked through a low-hanging doorway, and Remus ran straight into the top of the doorframe. He sank into a crouch, holding his forehead and groaning. Ow, 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 ow. Deceit sucked in a breath through his teeth. Sorry, forgot about that. Here, come sit on the couch. Fear, do we have any more ice? I'm not sure. Can you check? Deceit asked, grabbing Remus's elbow calmly to lead him to the couch, where he leaned back and kept rubbing at the aching area. Fear mumbled something, and Remus heard footsteps shuffling away. Sit right there. Then Deceit's hand was gone, and suddenly a soft light bloomed in the corner of the room. Remus blinked, already used to having no light at all. A shadow passed in front of it as Deceit moved around, lighting candles until the entire room was dancing with flickering shadows. Whoa, Remus breathed, a smile growing on his face. This is so cool! Deceit turned back to him, shrugging. In the candlelight, his scales glittered like gemstones, and Remus was entranced. As the side came over and sat down next to him, the creative side couldn't help but stare. "Does your head still hurt? Can I touch your scales?" Deceit blinked, flinching away. His gloved hand snuck up to his face, protecting himself. Why? Remus tilted his head. "Because they look cool? I want to know what they feel like. Can I?" I don't see why not." Deceit slowly let his hand fall into his lap. Remus needed no further invitation as he shifted himself on the couch to be within reach. He eagerly held his hand out, running a finger along the curve of Deceit's cheekbone where they stopped. The transition between skin and scales fascinated him, and he leaned in to try and see them better in the dim light. "You aren't scared of me," Deceit noted, sounding confused. Remus glanced over to meet his eyes. "No, why would I be?" "Because everyone else is?" Deceit sounded incredulous. Remus shrugged. "Well, I'm not like everyone else, then." Remus's fingers trailed lower and traced over the scar, cutting from the corner of Deceit's mouth up to his ear. Deceit winced. "What happened?" Remus breathed. Deceit was intentionally avoiding looking at Remus. "Even we run into things sometimes." Remus paused, then tilted his head so he was in Deceit's line of sight. "You don't need to lie to me. I promise I won't judge you. I've got a bunch of embarrassing scars, too." "That's his thing." Fear stepped into the room, hands shoved deep in his hoodie pockets. He fell back into an armchair, sitting across it and hooking his legs over the armrest. He trained his eyes on Remus, crossing his arms and scowling. "Lying, I mean. That's what he does." Deceit cleared his throat. "It's not important anyways. It's healed up and not a big deal. I'm more curious about you. What made you want to come into this place?" Remus pouted. "Hey, no fair. I've got questions too." "Then you can ask one after you answer mine. We'll go back and forth. Deal?" The creative side thought for a moment, then nodded. "All right, sure. I came down here because my brother kicked me out of our room because I was distracting him. And I didn't want to go downstairs because morality is down there and he annoys me. So I decided to come up here because he told me not to, and that just made me curious." Remus spouted all in one breath. "My turn. Why do you two live here instead of with the rest of us? There's plenty of room." Deceit's eyes flickered over at Fear for a moment before fixing back on Remus with a small, fake smile. "This is where we belong. We wouldn't fit in with the rest of you, so we stay here." Remus licked his lips. He didn't like that answer for some reason. "But we're all Thomas's sides, aren't we?" "Unlike you, we're not good for Thomas. He doesn't like us. It's better if we work from the shadows." Fear spoke from the corner. Deceit sighed quietly. "You have your world, and we have ours. They don't need to overlap." Remus shook his head. "That's not true. Because I've seen you guys on our side a bunch of times. You sit on the staircase and watch us during dinner, and you sneak into our kitchen at night and take food. I'm not mad, but don't you have food here? And if you really don't think we should overlap, then why do you come and watch us eat?" "I told you they knew." Fear shot at Deceit. "I know. And I think morality might know about the food thing, but the others don't. Or at least they've never said anything. So why don't you have food?" "This side of the mind is unpredictable. It doesn't make sense like your side. It doesn't always provide things that are edible," Deceit said slowly, picking his words carefully. "As for the dinner thing, well, it gets cold here." "So you come over so you can warm up? Why don't you come downstairs and introduce yourselves then?" "What about we don't belong there? Do you not understand?" Fear snapped, swinging his legs over and standing up straight. "We aren't like you. Thomas doesn't like us or what we do. This is the place for sides like us." Deceit flinched as Fear shouted, bringing a hand up to scratch at his scar. Remus narrowed his eyes. "Thomas doesn't always like us either. Doesn't that mean we all belong over here then?" Fear growled, fist clenched. Deceit, realizing Fear was at his limit, stood up and took Remus's hand to pull him to his feet. "I think it's time for you to go back. You wouldn't want someone to come here looking for you and get lost." Remus puffed his cheeks out but stood up, realizing with a start that he had been meant to be thinking of ideas to help Roman, but he'd gotten completely distracted. He let Deceit lead him back into the dark hallway, but found himself surprised to find that he could actually see. It wasn't very bright, nothing more than a dim glow, but it was enough to see the width of the hallway and the turns they were taking before they hit them. Deceit was silently watching him as they walked back to the doorway between the sides of the mind. He noticed that Remus's eyes were following the line of the hallway, rather than darting around blindly. He pursed his lips, curious. Here's where I'll leave you. Keep walking forward and you'll end up back on your side of the mind. Deceit stopped, letting go of Remus's hand. The creative side turned and smiled at Deceit. You know, I could leave some food for you guys sometimes. Right here. Or you could come to dinner. Morality's a pain, but he does make some good food. Deceit chuckled lightly. That's kind of you, but we can take care of ourselves. If you say so, I'll do it anyways. You like peanut butter, right? Remus didn't wait for a response, winking and leaving the hallway, practically melting at the sudden blast of warmth. Deceit stood there for a long time after Remus left. There was no way. He must have been imagining things. Remus was part of the others, the ones of the light. They didn't belong on this side. They didn't adjust to the darkness. So why, then, had there been a green glint in Remus's eye? Remus eased open his bedroom door slowly, wincing as it creaked. He peeked his head in and saw Roman bent over the desk, hand moving furiously as he wrote in his notebook. He didn't look up as Remus flopped onto the lower bunk, propping his feet up and closing his eyes. You were gone a while. I practically finished this project while you were off doing whatever you were doing. Roman reached his arms into the air and stretched, groaning as his muscles popped. He twisted in his chair, throwing an arm over the backrest and looking back at his brother. So, where did you go? Remus, what happened to your clothes? Remus opened his eyes and lifted his head to glance curiously at his brother, but his gaze was drawn down to his chest and he sucked in a breath. His normally light gray outfit was stained black, like someone had thrown a bucket of ink over him. He scrambled off the bed and checked the covers, but it hadn't leaked onto them. When he scrubbed it with his palms, a thin, almost oily coating came off onto his fingers. Roman stood up so fast his chair fell onto its back, striding over to Remus and grabbing his arm, trying to brush the oily dust away but only managing to smudge it more. Roman's hand tightened around his brother's bicep, eyes staring down but not seeing anything. Where did you go? He growled low. Remus tried to grin, but it became a wince. I got curious. You didn't want me around and Patton was downstairs, so I just went exploring. Roman narrowed his eyes. You went into the hallway. We aren't supposed to go there, Remus. But there's nothing bad there. I met the Sais who live over there, and they're really nice. Well, Fear is kind of rude, but Deceit is really nice. I promised them that I'd bring them some food. Remus found himself telling his brother everything. He didn't notice how Roman's grip was tightening painfully on his arm until his fingers started tingling. Ro, let go, that hurts. You weren't supposed to go over there, Remus. Patton told us we weren't allowed to because it's dangerous. Now look what happened. But Patton's wrong. There's nothing scary over there. Remus raised his voice, pushing Roman away as the grip around his arm became painful. We don't always have to listen to Patton, you know. He's not our dad. We're all parts of Thomas. Roman gaped at him. He couldn't believe his ears. He took a breath to say something, probably to scold him again, when there was a knock at the door and he jumped. Are you all right, Roman? I heard you shouting. Patton asked through the door, worried. I'm all right. We were just excited about the idea we had for Thomas's project. Right, Remus? Roman said shrilly. Remus stared at his brother. Now he was the one who couldn't believe his ears. Was he lying? To Patton? He tried to open his mouth to tell Patton the truth, but suddenly a hand shot up and slapped over his mouth, muffling his words. Well, all right, if you're sure you're okay. Don't overwork yourself. I'm going to get dinner started. Okay. Roman held his breath until he heard Patton walk away and back down the stairs. He glanced back at Remus, raising an eyebrow as he saw his brother fighting to pull his own hand off his mouth. What are you doing? As if released from some spell, Remus was finally able to tug his hand off his mouth, huffing in annoyance. I wasn't doing anything. My hand wouldn't move. Roman rolled his eyes. Sure. Then he sighed, moving to fall back dramatically onto his bed. He tilted his head to the side, watching Remus as he went back to trying to brush the black substance stuck to his clothes. Why did you really go over there, Remus? You can tell me. But I did tell you. I've been curious about that hallway for years, and I didn't want to go downstairs and deal with morality. So I went exploring. Why didn't you want to talk to Patton? Roman sounded genuinely confused, and Remus grimaced at him. You're kidding, right? He hates me. Why would I want to talk to someone who hates me? He doesn't hate you. Patton doesn't hate anyone. He just thinks some of your ideas are a bit extreme, that's all. Remus rolled his eyes, deciding that these stains weren't coming out and he just needed to change. He tugged his shirt off, going over to their closet and searching for something else. He found an older costume of his hanging in the back. It was slightly too small, but it would work. Same thing. He doesn't like it when I help you, even though I'm creativity too. It's like he forgot that we used to be the same person, Remus growled, a sudden rush of anger coursing through him. He clenched his teeth, hands balling into fists. Remus, come on. We both know that isn't... The younger twin whirled around, glaring daggers at his brother. And you're not much better. You barely let me help Thomas at all anymore. I have ideas too, you know. I want to help him achieve his dreams too. But you just shove me out of the room and tell me I can leave everything to you. What if I want to help, huh? Roman sat up, hands covering his mouth as he watched Remus duck his head, squeezing his eyes shut and taking heavy breaths. Remus, maybe I do belong with them after all. The elder twin stood up, moving to Remus and wrapping him in a hug. I'm so sorry, Remus. I didn't realize. But I'm going to stop. We're going to work together from now on. You belong here, with us. With me. You're my other half, after all. Remus lifted his head, looking Roman in the eye. Promise? Roman smiled softly, ruffling his brother's hair. Promise. We had always been so close. It was like we could read each other's minds. For years, it was like we were still two halves of a single whole. Unfortunately, we found out soon enough that that bond had dissolved over the years. Before either of us knew it, it was like we were from completely different planets, and neither of us knew when or how it happened. Roman? Yeah? The creative side called back, looking up from where he was lying on the floor, working on a new idea with Remus. Can you come here a moment? Be right there. Roman hopped to his feet, tugging his shirt down where it had ridden up. I'll be right back, okay? He told his brother, who hummed. Grab me some water while you're down there? Roman grinned. Sure. Patton was sat on the couch as he bounded down the stairs, and the moral side patted the spot beside him. Come take a seat, Roman. His heart jumped into his throat. Patton sounded serious. Had he done something wrong? All his excited energy disappeared as he gingerly took a seat on the couch. Patton passed him a crumpled piece of paper. What is... Just read it. Tell me what you think. Oh, had Patton written something? Did he want feedback? He took it carefully, smoothing it with his fingers before scanning the page. Roman's face morphed into shock as he read, and he looked up at Patton with wide eyes. Patton, I can explain. The moral side held up a hand, and Roman shut his mouth quickly. You don't have to say anything. I know what happened. Roman hung his head. I'm sorry, Morality. We were just trying to have some fun with the project. We didn't mean for Thomas to get in trouble. Patton sighed, resting a comforting hand on Roman's shoulder. You're not in trouble, Roman, but I wanted to talk to you alone about Remus. What about him? The creative side ventured cautiously. Patton sat up straight, prompting Roman to look at him. You need to stop letting Roman help you with projects like this. Roman's mouth gaped open as he comprehended what Patton had said. The moral side tapped the paper in Roman's lap. Because if he keeps helping, Thomas is going to get more of these sent home to his parents. We both know it was because of him that the project turned out the way it did. I'm not blaming you. I should have been more careful and kept a closer eye on what Thomas was doing. But Patton, you don't understand. You can still spend time with him, if you want. As long as he keeps his brand of creativity confined within the mindscape, it'll be all right. Thomas is a good person. I can't let Remus ruin that for him. Roman couldn't believe his ears. Was all of this really coming from Patton? But I promised him I'd let him help Thomas more. What am I supposed to do? Patton winced. Roman, why did you go and do that? You know how Thomas feels about some of the things Remus comes up with. Because he helps me. He comes up with ideas better than I ever could sometimes. Because I wasn't complete without him. The moral side chewed on his lip, thinking. Then he huffed a small sigh and smiled at Roman. All right, then how about this? Remus can help you when you're brainstorming, but things like this, he pointed to the letter, have to get run through me before Thomas starts working on them. That way we can avoid doing something wrong like this again. Fair? No. Okay, I'll make sure to run things by you first. Patton smiled wider and he pulled Roman into a tight hug. I'm proud of you, Roman. You create so many things that make Thomas happy. We'll get past this just fine. Roman swallowed past the lump in his throat and smiled weakly. Yeah, okay. Can I go back to my room now? He was released from the hug, and with a last ruffle of his hair, Roman was allowed to stand up. He stood tall, keeping his hands curled tightly at his sides to hide how he was shaking. In his foggy state, he didn't notice the figure looking out from the banister dart up the stairs, nor did he hear the door slam down the hall. Remus glanced up as his brother entered the room, sitting up and crossing his legs. "Told you he didn't like me." Roman jumped, rubbing his arm guiltily. "You heard?" The younger twin stared at Roman, intent. "You're not gonna listen to him, right? We can't let morality tell us what to do. He doesn't get to decide what ideas Thomas has, what he gets to create. That's our job. Well, we can't just ignore him either. Thomas got in trouble because of us, Remus. Because of our project. Because of me, you mean." Roman hesitated, staring at the ground. I don't know." "Oh, but I do. Morality doesn't like anything I do. He doesn't like how he can't control what I do. I do what I want, when I want, and there's nothing he can do about it. Remus, it's true. Why do you think he just called you down to talk, when I'm the one he's mad at? It's because he thinks he can control you, too. But he's not the boss of us. Now, come on, let's get back to this. Thomas is waiting." Remus threw himself back onto his stomach, grabbing his pencil. Roman stayed where he was, watching Remus add to their joint art project. He looked up after his brother didn't move. "What are you doing? Come on, help me out." I can't." "You can't help me?" "No. Yes. That wasn't what I meant." Remus narrowed his eyes. "Okay." Roman took a deep, shaky breath. "I meant I can't just do whatever I want. We need to listen to morality." His brother's eye twitched, but his expression otherwise remained neutral. "No, we don't. Patton knows what Thomas wants better than we do. If he says that we need to hold back a little, then we should." Remus watched him for a moment before he silently got to his feet. He stalked up to his brother, shoulders back and chin raised. "Fight me." Rowan blinked. "What?" "Fight me. If you win, we'll do what morality says." Remus mocked, a glint in his eye. "But if I win, we do what we want, and forget about trying to please morality, or any of the others while we're at it." "Remus, please, I don't want—" "Are you agreeing with me, then?" Well, no, but then we have no choice. Come on, the imagination is waiting." Remus's voice somehow held its usual energy with none of the warmth. He shoved his way past Roman, glancing back at him expectantly. Realizing his brother wasn't giving him a choice, Roman followed him with a sinking feeling in his stomach that, no matter who won this match, things would never be the same. Throughout the years, the twins had both grown adept at manipulating the imagination. It was their second home, their safe place, somewhere they could be wholly, unabashedly themselves without scrutiny. Roman, as the creativity Thomas called on the most, had grown to be disciplined. Organized chaos, as Logan had once described him. Ideas filtered dozens of times before they were allowed through, already fully formed. He was fantasy worlds, built with careful precision, every piece in its place. He went to great lengths to protect his ideas, hypersensitive to criticism and critique. Remus was the exact opposite. With no filter in sight, he let any and all thoughts he had spill out without a care in the world. He was pieces of dialogue or character that come in the shower or late at night, there one moment and gone the next, fleeting, constantly jumping from one idea to the next without stopping to build foundations along the way. He didn't care what the others thought of him, or his ideas, deaf to cries of disgust or suggestions to improve. When they worked together, they could move mountains. When they fought... The imagination shook with the sheer energy the two were exerting. Remus battered against Roman's defenses with everything he could think of. Monsters, explosions, even his own weapons. No matter what he did, the castle walls Roman had thrown up stood tall, unyielding. Remus, however, couldn't handle that kind of beating. After rounds of constant attacks, the younger twin was finally taken down by a blow to the head that left him seeing stars. He laid still, staring up at the sky. Storm clouds were rolling in. Not surprising. The imagination was connected to their emotions, and tended to reflect their moods. The remnants of their battle faded into dust, and Remus rolled his head to the side, catching sight of Roman as he walked towards him. The elder twin's face was schooled into a neutral expression, jaw clenched tight as he stopped at Remus's feet and stared down at him. Remus let a humorless laugh slip out, eyes sliding shut. "Kill me now. I'd rather die than have to listen to morality." He heard Roman swallow, and felt a soft kick to his foot. "Get up." "Nope." "Get up, Remus." He cracked an eye open and saw Roman had turned around. "We're going to be late for dinner. Let's go." "Forget it. I'm staying here. Morality probably won't even notice I'm not there." Roman rolled his shoulders back, standing straight. Fine. Suit yourself. Remus closed his eyes again, not wanting to watch his brother walk away. Cold drops of rain started to fall, burning like ice against his skin. They ran down his cheeks, mixing with salty tears and falling to the muddy ground. Roman stepped out of the imagination, the dirt and dust that had gotten on his clothes vanishing as he did so. He heard someone knock at the door, and he told them he'd be down in a moment. Footsteps walked away, and it was all Roman could do to not collapse in a heap right there. He had to be strong. That was what everyone expected, needed from him. He couldn't show weakness or back down from a challenge, even something like this. Wiping the moisture from his eyes with the heel of his hand, he plastered a confident smile on his face and left the room. Dinner was a quiet affair. Patton tried to engage Roman several times, asking about his latest projects. After receiving one-word answers to his questions, the moral side realized that Roman wasn't in the mood to talk. He tried to turn the conversation to Valentine, but he was equally quiet. He scarfed down his food and excused himself quietly, leaving his dishes in the sink. Patton chewed on his lip as Roman followed suit. Soon he was left alone with Logan, who didn't seem concerned at the strange behavior. What's up with them? I haven't seen either of them all day. Do you think something happened, Logan? The logical side adjusted his glasses. I haven't seen Roman today, but I do know that Valentine is sulking because I asked him to leave me alone while I was working with Thomas on his homework. Patton sighed. That wasn't new. Logan had never been very keen on listening to Valentine's excited rants, even when he wasn't on a deadline. You know, Logan, you should try and indulge him every once in a while. I know you take your work very seriously, but Thomas needs to take breaks sometimes. I allow him to take breaks, and Roman takes him off on wild adventures. That's more than enough of a stress reliever. All Valentine wants is to keep Thomas in front of the TV all day, watching any number of ridiculous shows and movies. He's going to ruin his vision at this rate. At any other time, Patton would have made a joke about that, given that both he and Logan had taken to wearing glasses themselves in the past few years. Instead, he pursed his lips, setting his silverware down. Logan, you of all people should know that's not true. Valentine keeps Thomas happy, and he offers a distraction when things are hard. Logan rolled his eyes dismissively. But Thomas doesn't need a distraction. He needs to focus. He's started thinking about what he wants to do as a career, and Roman has gotten it into his head that he wants to do something creative. That takes a lot of work and time. We can't waste that precious time on the couch doing nothing. Patton held up his hands in surrender. I'm not trying to fight with you, Logan. I just think you might be selling passion short, is all. The logical side narrowed his eyes. Well, you certainly can't lecture me about that, then. Huh? Logan pushed his plate to the side, having finished the meal and set his chin in his hand. He stared at Patton with an unimpressed look. If I'm selling Valentine short, then you're doing the same with Remus. Patton spluttered, waving his hands as if to clear the air. Those are two completely different things. Are they? Yes! Valentine may cause Thomas to be lazy sometimes, but that's nothing compared to the trouble Remus causes. Thomas got a letter sent to his parents because of his contributions. He doesn't listen to anyone, Logan. What else am I supposed to do? Limiting him is not going to be good for Thomas in the long run. And that goes for Valentine, too. They stared at each other for a long moment, two strong wills incapable of backing down from their particular stance. Eventually, Patton gave a huge sigh and let his shoulders drop. Look, let's just talk about this tomorrow. Logan nodded silently, gathering both of their plates and taking them to the sink. He rinsed them off and grabbed a cloth to wash them. Patton packed away the leftover food in Tupperware, knowing as he did so that it would be gone the next morning. He had long given up trying to catch the thieves. They somehow knew when he was waiting up for them. Anytime he did hear someone pass by his door and sneak downstairs, it ended up being Remus up for a midnight snack. It was impossible to feed the side enough to keep him full, apparently. At least it was usually healthy food. Or he was very good at sneaking the cookies, because Patton never caught him with one of those. After grabbing a towel and drying the dishes silently beside Logan, they went back to their own rooms to think and plan what they would say the following morning. Remus awoke to a dark, quiet room. After he'd left the imagination, he had climbed up to his bunk and swaddled himself in blankets, hiding from the world. His chest was aching, and he had a splitting headache that had only gotten slightly better with sleep. The side sat up, extracting himself from the blankets as he tried to determine what time it was. A glance at the clock below him told him it was past midnight. He groaned quietly. God, he was hungry. Why did he think skipping dinner was a good idea? That, coupled with his headache, made for a very grumpy Remus. He clambered down the bunk bed ladder and barely spared a glance at his twins sprawled none so gracefully on his own bed. Remus crept out of the room, easing the squeaky door closed without a sound. He'd become practiced at this over the years. The darkness no longer bothered him. In fact, he'd grown accustomed to it, his eyes adjusting to see in dull shades of gray. He knew that Patton knew he snuck downstairs for food, but he had yet to realize why he did so. Thankfully, the few times he'd been caught, he was hungry enough to use the late-night snack excuse. Remus tiptoed down the stairs, skipping the one that creaked and stepping on the outside of the last two to keep them silent. Then he heard a small sniffle and Remus froze. He wasn't alone. Though it was pitch black, Remus could make out a shadow on the couch, hunched over with his head in his hands. There was another stifled cry, and Remus knew immediately who it was. Val? Remus heard him suck in a breath through his teeth and saw him look up blindly towards the stairs. Remus? Is that you? What's wrong? Are you okay? Remus asked, shuffling over to the couch and perching on the armrest. Valentine shook his head and laughed softly. No, but you don't want to hear me talk about it. No one actually cares about what I have to say. Remus narrowed his eyes, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. Who told you that? He shook Valentine slightly when the side remained quiet. Val, who told you that? I'll kill him for you. Don't kill anyone, Rem. I'm fine, really. The statement didn't convince him, considering his voice cracked and Remus could hear him struggling with every word. Valentine Sanders, tell me who told you nobody cares. Now. He didn't bother trying to hide his building anger. Valentine shrunk, hanging his head. Logan did. He said that all I do is make things harder for everyone else. Make it so you guys can't do your jobs because I always distract him from what's important. You know that's all bullshit, right? Valentine gasped. Remus! It's true. Listen, if Thomas really didn't need you, then you would have faded away a long time ago. The fact that you're here means that you do things for Thomas that none of us can do for him. But they don't like what I do. Valentine mumbled, and Remus groaned. He hopped off the couch and went over to flip on the lights. Everyone was asleep anyways, and he knew Valentine couldn't see in the dark like he could. The side on the couch flinched as the room was flooded with light, covering his eyes. Remus, what are you doing? The creative side stalked back over to Valentine, plopping down on the floor in front of him. He waited until his friend was able to open his eyes without being blinded, staring at him with an intense gaze. Do you think what you do is important? Remus asked, putting his hand on Valentine's knee. Valentine twisted his fingers in his hair, not meeting Remus's eyes. Well, yeah, I do, but Logan... It doesn't matter what Logan thinks. He can go suck it. That's easy for you to say. Valentine cut him off, shaking his head. Thomas actually listens to you. He's been ignoring every attempt I make to get him invested into something. It's like every time I open my mouth, there's someone else who's talking louder and has his attention. Remus snickered. Yeah, right. Thomas doesn't listen to me. But you're his creativity? Morality made a deal with Roman that anything I help with, he has to look at before we give it to Thomas. And for years, he's always tried to keep me quiet, away from Roman and anything that might make it to Thomas. He thinks I'm dangerous. Valentine snapped his head up, staring at Remus with wide eyes. That's how Logan treats me. He thinks I'm lazy and all I do is distract Thomas from more important things. All I want is for him to be happy. Why do we have to listen to them? They don't care about us. We don't. Yes, we do. After all, they're the ones who are in charge. If we don't do what they say, we'll just continue to be ignored. Valentine sighed. Remus had an odd look on his face. No, we won't. Morality and logic aren't the only ones who control what Thomas thinks and knows. If you're talking about Roman, I doubt he's going to help us against those two. He's their favorite. He's not going to give that up. The creative side shook his head, a grin slowly growing on his face. No, I don't mean Roman. I mean the others. The ones who live in the hallway past our rooms. Remus! Patton said we aren't supposed to go down that way. It's dangerous. You could get hurt. I've been there every week for years. Do I look hurt to you? Valentine's mouth gaped open, and he dropped his voice into a hushed whisper, as if he would get in trouble if the walls heard his words. What's it like there? Is it scary? What are the others like? Well, it's dark, but you get used to it. I've been able to see in pitch dark for a while now. There are two sides who live over there. Fear's, well, I don't see him much, honestly. But Deceit is amazing. He can control what we tell Thomas. If he doesn't want to know something, then it's Deceit's job to make sure we don't tell him. But I thought that was Morality's job. Remus shook his head. No, Morality can ask us to stop, and we do because we think he has power over us. But Deceit can actually stop us from talking if he wants to. But Remus's grin grew wicked, a mischievous glint in his eyes. That also means that he can make sure that Thomas doesn't ignore us. Valentine was shaking with barely controlled excitement. He can make it so Thomas doesn't ignore me anymore? Please, Remus, you have to take me there. That's all I've wanted for so long. I can, but Val, if I do, you probably can't come back. That made him pause, staring at his hands. You mean? Remus sighed. Morality and logic both know what's over there, and most importantly, they think the sides over there are dangerous. If you're gonna ask them for help... Valentine swallowed hard. If I leave, they'll think I'm a bad guy too. Roman, he'll think I abandoned him. Well... Valentine whined in the back of his throat, rubbing at his eyes as tears welled up again. Oh God, Remus, I can't leave him alone. But I can't stand staying here anymore. What am I supposed to do? Remus shrugged helplessly as his friend broke down in front of him. This was not his forte. Passion had always been the most emotional one of them all, being largely responsible for many of Thomas's feelings. All he could do was gently pat his knee in a vague attempt to comfort him. I mean, I think Roman would rather you do what's best for you, rather than suffer here just because of him. 'Cause he's got that whole chivalry thing going on. And besides, your room and a lot of your stuff will still be here. He'll still have pieces of you to remember. The words sounded weak to him, but something about what he said made Valentine freeze, slowly lowering his hands from his eyes. Remus, that's it! You're a genius! If I give them my responsibilities, it's like I'm not really leaving at all. But I won't have to be ignored for them anymore. What are you talking about? Remus asked, confused at Valentine's constant shifting moods. It's perfect, Remus! Thomas needs the things I do, but I don't want to do them anymore because the others don't know how important they are. But if I give it to them, they'll have to realize. And then, once they do, I can take them back and everything will go back to normal. But they're not you, Valentine. How are they supposed to do your job? Remus couldn't imagine ever doing someone else's job. They had their titles for a reason. I'll give them things that are close to what they already represent. Like, for Roman, he can get all the love of cartoons and movies and things like that. Since he already likes fantasy, it'll be easy for him. Morality already looks out for Thomas and his friends, so what's the difference if he now feels the emotions that come along with that? And logic... Valentine started giggling wildly, and Remus hoped that everyone else was fast asleep and wouldn't come down to check on the noise. Logic. He'll get what I've been trying to tell him all this time. He likes making sure Thomas can focus on the things he needs to learn, so I'll give him that drive to learn, see what he thinks when he finally feels some emotion in that stone-cold heart of his. His eyes were wild and his smile was too wide. Remus started to wonder if he should have just kept his mouth shut. Val, what does that leave you? You're giving away everything. You could die. No, I'll keep something. I'll be all right. After all, it's just for the time it takes for them to realize that they need me. Then I'll come back and everything will go back to normal. He paused, chewing his lip. But they can't know where I went. If they know I went to the other side, they'll just try and bring me back. So, Remus, I need you to promise me that you won't tell them where I am. No matter what, you can't tell them that I went to the dark side. Remus stared at him. I can't. Remus, please. If they wake up tomorrow and find me missing, they're just going to go searching, and you know that they'll ask you. I'm coming with you. Remus's voice was steady, and he met Valentine's shocked expression with a confident smile. I never belonged here anyways. It's surprising I lasted this long without being kicked out. But Deceit can make it so Thomas will finally listen to me again. Valentine took a long, deep breath. What about Roman? Remus huffed, trying to put it off. It's like you said. He's their favorite. He's already chosen his side. It's just up to us to choose ours now. They stared at each other for a long, quiet moment. They both came to the same conclusion and nodded at each other. Let's go. Remus told Valentine about his weekly food runs he'd been doing for Deceit and Fear, and about how the other side didn't often have food. They raided the kitchen, stuffing their pockets and arms full of food. The kitchen would restock itself in time. Remus knew that they would manage. The two snuck upstairs, past the closed bedroom doors. Remus had Valentine walk in front, realizing that if he went first, they ran a high risk of Valentine walking into him and making noise. Remus paused at his bedroom door. He turned to face it, staring blankly. "You don't have to come with me, Remus," Valentine mumbled quietly, eyes soft as he heard the creative side stop moving behind him. "I'll be all right on my own." Remus sucked in a shaky breath, trying to steady his hands so he didn't drop anything. He could stay. He could go back to sleep and pretend that this was all just a dream, give Valentine the food in his arms and tell him how to find Deceit. And when he woke up in the morning, he would feign ignorance, maybe even tell them that he'd witnessed passion fade away right before his eyes, all because of their ignorance and willful neglect. He could hold it against them. He could use it as leverage. He could prove that he's not the one who's dangerous to Thomas. Maybe it would be enough to get Morality to give up trying to control him and his brother. They could stay together, and they could take control. No longer would Patton be in charge. Remus snickered and shook his head, turning back to Valentine and marching into the hallway with his head held high. Maybe he was the evil twin after all. Thank you all so much for listening. I'm sorry that I had to split this into two, but it was just a little too long to put it into one video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and if you like what you hear and you want to read more, you can find the link to the fic in the description. See you next time!